Hey guys, it's Coach Gooders here with another 6th grade Heritage Studies, Ancient Civ, Cultural Geography video for you guys. This one should be used in tandem with your Unit 5 guided notes, so make sure you have those out and ready to fill out. This one, just like the last one, is going to be split up into 4 different videos as opposed to 2. You can have Rome, parts A and B, and the Byzantines, part A and B. Now this is usually the longest section that we have. So we're going to see how it goes with the filming, but get those out and ready, and here we go. So the Roman Empire at its heyday is not the largest empire ever, but it was one of the longest lasting and most, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of impact on other civilizations, the most successful. And you can see it stretched into Great Britain in the north, Africa and Egypt in the south, all the way over to Spain in the west, and far into the Middle East, into Arabia and Israel and those regions in the east. That's what Italy looks like today. Obviously, you got your Colosseum. You got a lot of the churches here as you can overlook the city. And then this is a view from St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, which is located in the center of Rome. And this is the Pantheon, which is one of the oldest still standing and still functioning buildings in the world. Alright, essential questions. Go ahead and pause the video here so you can write these down, and then when you're ready you can resume. Why is the Roman Republic Empire such a big deal even today? And why did the Byzantine Empire last so long after the fall of Rome? Early Rome, pre-509 BC. The first inhabitants are called the Latins, which is where we get the Latin language and the idea of their culture from. They traveled over the Alps and settled in the Italian peninsula. It is from the Latins that we get the story of the legendary founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, which we'll talk more about, and how another legend plays into that a little bit later on. The city of Rome is located on one of the 7 hills in the region, the Palatine Hill, and is between 2 rivers, the Tiber and the Aniene. What is some of the things you would want to gain out of settling on the hill? Be able to discuss that and be ready for that when we get into class and discuss this. The region was eventually settled by the Latins, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, and the Etruscans, and the Etruscans are the one who briefly had control over the area around the city known as Rome for a while. This is what Palatine Hill now looks like. It's part of the Roman Forum. There's a lot of old buildings and gardens on it still to this day. And the major river there is the Tiber, one of the oldest still working bridges that was built by the Roman Empire. It's several thousand years old and it's still being used today. Now this picture here is a famous one depicting Aeneas. Aeneas was one of the princes of Troy who escaped. You find the beginning of his story in the Iliad, and we're going to talk more about him later, but this is his son with his sister, and also carrying his father on his back. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we work to the legends of Rome. This is a sculpture, and we'll talk more about it. It's called the Pietà, and we're going to talk about the Roman idea of Pietas later on. But this is a sculpture by Michelangelo of Mary holding her son Jesus after he's taken off the cross. It's located in St. Peter's Basilica off to the right when you walk in to the main building there. And it's one of the most amazing pieces of art that you could ever see. But there's a reason I have those up there. We'll get to those. And then, of course, you got your Romulus and Remus statue here, very famous. And then Romulus is about to kill his brother here. Spoiler alert, but we'll get there. Early Roman society and government. You have 2 major social classes, the patricians and the plebeians. The patricians are the few. They're the ruling class, the wealthy landowners and nobles, and they have most of the power. The plebeians are the many. They are the commoners, farmers, traders, and craftsmen, and while they make up most of the population, they don't have much say in what goes on in their country and in their government. Their first form of government is a monarchy, which means rule by one, so like a kingdom. This continued under the control of the Etruscans, and the symbol for the monarchy, and later for any of the powerful branches of the Roman government, was the faxes. There's a bundle of wooden rods around an axe. Looks like that. The axe itself symbolizes the power and the might, while the bundle of rods around it can be taken from an old parable, which Jesus used as well. A bundle of sticks is not easily broken. So this kind of signifies, out of the many one, we are stronger united than we are apart. You got your plebeians, or excuse me, your patricians in their nice white fancy robes, and your plebeians in the darker colors. Patrician family, plebeian family. The Roman Republic, 509 to the year 31 BC. Eventually, the more native Latins drove the Etruscans and their king out of the country. The government was broken up into three parts in order to separate power from one person maintaining it for too long. The consuls, the Senate, and then the assembly, or sometimes known as the Assembly of Centuries, but we've shortened it here. The consuls, there were two of them. They managed the local affairs, commanded the army. They served as supreme judges, and they had 1-year terms. The Senate was the most powerful of any of these branches. There were 300 of them. They served for life. Once you were elected, they passed laws, controlled the finances and money of the region, and they dictated foreign affairs with other countries and other nations. And then you had the assembly, voted on new laws, they declared war, and they were the ones who elected the consuls. The problem with this idea of this republic is only the patricians, only the upper class, can be elected originally to any of these positions. So once again, while it looks good, on paper, you're still not giving a voice to the vast majority of your country. This is actually kind of how we get our government today. We are a democratic republic in the United States. Our government is split up into 3 different branches: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. Each one has different powers over the other branches so that one does not get too powerful, and we kind of take that idea from this. We elect people to make decisions for us, like the president, like our congressmen, even our governors in the state. So we owe that to the Roman Republic. Got your consuls, and you got the facties in the background right here. The Senate, and then your Assembly of Centuries. Struggle for the plebeians. There's a great divide between the social classes. So kind of think about it like the caste system in India. Patricians held political power while plebeians could not even vote. Eventually, a council of plebeians was formed. The tribal assembly with 10 leaders called tribunes. So they were able to have somewhat of a say in their government. So it's a step in the right direction. By 450 BC, official Roman law was recorded on 12 bronze tablets. This is known as the Law of the 12 Tablets or Law of the 12 Tables. These bronze tablets are going to be put up in the center of every single city, kind of in the forum in Rome, and in the different areas, the shopping areas where everybody traveled in order to take care of their business, so that everybody could see, everybody could read, and everybody knew what the expectations are. Meetings often took place in the Roman Forum, the big marketplace gathering, and they came up with the term veto, which means I forbid, which we have borrowed in our government as well. The president has the power of veto. If a bill for a law comes on his desk that he does not like, he can veto it, send it back to them in order for them to change it. And there you got your 12 bronze tablets, a representation of that right here. And we'll do an activity with that as we're working through, really when we get into the Byzantines. The growth of Rome. The Roman Republic lasted for several hundred years, which was a time of expansion from a single city-state to an empire. By 265 BC, the Italian peninsula was under complete Roman control. And instead of simply wiping out and killing the conquered peoples, they would be offered citizenship as part of Rome. They even let them keep most of their customs as long as they paid their taxes and didn't fight back against them, which allowed the nation to expand into what we see right now. The Punic Wars. After conquering the peninsula, Rome turned its attention to the west and the city of Carthage in North Africa. Over the course of 125 years, the Romans and Carthaginians fought 3 wars, now called the Punic Wars, after the Roman or the Latin word for the people of Carthage, which was Punici. First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC. Carthage had established a colony on the Mediterranean island of Sicily, which Rome wanted in order to solidify control over the region. In order to defeat Carthage in naval battles, the Roman Navy developed a new weapon, planks with spiked hooks that would allow them to kind of hook and attach 2 ships together. Then they would pull up alongside them, drop those planks down, and then the Roman soldiers would run from one ship onto the enemy ship, kill everybody on board, and now you have 2 ships. And they would just kind of do that and multiply the control as they were going through the battle. Romans won, eventually gained control of Sicily, and then made Carthage pay for the war. And this was just the start of the hostilities between them. So in 264, this is the Carthaginian Empire, which at that point was much more expansive than the Roman Empire, but not as many people. Good example of what these planks look like. That guy didn't quite make it. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC. This is the most famous of the Punic Wars because of the general of the Carthaginians, Hannibal Barca. He has a very interesting story where his father made him swear on his deathbed that he would always be an enemy of Rome, and they would never stop fighting against them as long as he lived. He took that to heart. Strategy: invade the areas outside of Italy to gain support and troops for his cause. Also, Hannibal planned a surprise invasion of Rome by crossing the Alps, which had never been done before, especially with a large army. They left from Spain with 40,000 men and a herd of war elephants, but due to the extreme cold and warlike tribes in the region, many of the men and elephants died before reaching Rome. Even with the smaller numbers, Hannibal's brilliance in battle allowed them to win time after time, and they got within 6 miles of the city of Rome before having to be turned around. Roman General Scipio, who's seen as the hero of this episode of Roman history, launched a surprise invasion of Carthage, which forced Hannibal to come back home to defend his city. Scipio and Hannibal met at the Battle of Zama, right outside the city of Carthage, where they fought their last battle, and Hannibal was defeated and eventually exiled. So typically, so down here is where Carthage is. The easiest way for people to get here was, and the shortest way, would be to sail right to Rome. He takes the long way around, recruiting soldiers all the way while he gets there, and is able to be super successful until finally having to return home. Oh, you got war elephants, which is really cool. More war elephants. That's Scipio. And then Zama somewhere around here. Not 100% sure. And then you got your third Punic War and control of the Mediterranean, which is fought about 60 years after that, between 149 and 146 BC. Rome had finally had enough, finally surrounded the actual city of Carthage in a 3-year siege, after which they conquered and then destroyed the city. They destroyed it so thoroughly that the Carthaginians that were not killed were sold into slavery, and then they sowed salt into the soil, which drains the soil of its nutrients and water, which makes growing crops there really, really difficult. This was a total destruction, annihilation of an entire people group, because that's what happens when you mess with Rome at that time. They wanted to make an example out of them. After defeating Carthage for the last time, went around and conquered Greece and the lands that Alexander the Great had previously conquered, allowing those cultures to kind of mix together. And finally, to solidify control over the Mediterranean, Rome made an alliance with Egypt, which proved to be pretty beneficial. Representation of Carthage back then. Finally, the last one that we'll get to today. As you are expanding, it got harder and harder to keep control of this area because it was just so huge. So they organized regions into different provinces who gave money or grain as tribute in Rome in exchange for order and protection. Farmers who were pushed into service would return home from fighting and see their farms destroyed by neglect and warfare because they weren't there to take care of them. Wealthy patricians would then buy these farms and then make their slaves work there. And oftentimes the farmers would end up among the slaves because they had no other way to make money. Patricians also secured political power by bribing certain plebeians to vote certain ways in their tribal assembly. And then corruption grew with the growth of publicans, another group of people, publicans, fancy word for tax collector, who would take often more money than what was required to make a higher individual profit for themselves. So we're going to leave it right here, where things are not looking as good for the Roman Republic, but we'll pick back up. No mini quiz, guys, but I appreciate it and look forward to discussing this with you as we enter into the next phase of Roman history.